In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
Well, what's happening is that the military has become its own production house. They're putting out their own messages, they're putting out their own magazines, they're putting out their own news stories, they're producing their own pictures. Basically as end products, hoping that the news media is going to take their video, take their pictures, take their stories, and publish them. In some cases, there are places out there that do this.
Without vetting it. Without vetting it,
of course. But a lot of this stuff is basically laziness on part of the publications. You know, it's like, we'll use that picture because they gave it to us, versus sending our photographer out there and taking the picture and seeing if what we're doing is actually what is happening. I mean, the military is going to take the best picture, the best video, and the best storyline to feed to you. If the New York Times goes out and covers a story, and I hope they are, they're going to see things the way they want to see things, and maybe differently as to how the military is going to feed it out there, or the contractors are going to feed it out to you. They're going to put a spin on it when they give it to you. It's not really journalism.
Each year, the Department of Defense spends billions to sell itself to the world through advertising, recruiting, public affairs, and even a Hollywood media operation. A National Security News Service investigation reveals that the Department of Defense contractors, often with clear conflicts of interest, now control much of the Pentagon's public information. The Department of Defense views its relationship with the American public as another battle it has to win. It conducts its public relations of war with tens of thousands of troops, civilian contractors, enlisted reservists and specialists, and officers, all commanded by flying rank generals and admirals.
This is the force the Pentagon has assembled to inspire the minds and hearts of the American people into shelling out tax dollars to support their mission.
I believe there's a different path we must take. We must engage with anyone and everyone who is interested in what the department is doing. I believe we need more engagement, not less. We should be meeting our stakeholders wherever they are. In order to effectively communicate our message, we must be communicating across all platforms, new and old. By creating richer, more interesting content, we can create a deeper connection with the American public and nourish the growing news appetite on our terms.
The DC Bureau, it's a news service. We just want
You're wanting to set up a what?
a stand up. You like talking in front of the camera? Yeah.
I want to say no.
Okay.
If you get a hold of public affairs, they might allow it.
Okay.
Other than that.
To start one's career in military public affairs, the Defense Information School, also known as DINFOS, is housed at Fort Meade. We began our quest with a simple call for information to understand how the military public affairs program operates. It started with contacting the Defense Information School, or DINFOS, at Fort Meade. The school has a long history of public affairs and journalism training. DINFOS boasts of its long-standing mission of producing outstanding public affairs and visual information personnel for the U.S. Department of Defense. Lieutenant Commander Karen Eifert is the current Director of Public Affairs of the Defense Information School. She assured the National Security News Service that she was working to gather information and set up a tour of the Defense Information School. Eifert was anything but professional or respectful.
Well, first and foremost, we're military and we follow orders, and as soon as we get the go-ahead, we'll be happy to accommodate you.
Actually, I've got a whole series of emails that have been passed on by the reporters they sent to you, where you first said that you were going to provide them information, first said you were going to arrange a tour. None of that ever happened.
I don't think that's what I said. I said I'd be happy to help you.
Okay, well, not much help so far.
Oh, I'm giving you as much help as I'm allowed to give you.
Okay, well, who's your commander?
My commander is at the Pentagon.
No, you've got a commander there.
No, you will talk to the Pentagon.
Looking to the broader military community, all leaders must understand the role of the press and the importance of working with the media. And we cannot hide our bad news stories. Bad news gets out one way or the other, and we must come to terms with telling the bad stories as well as the good. When bad things happen, the American people should hear it from us, not as a scoop on the Drudge Report. Unlike many fine red wines, bad news does not get better with age. This requires commanders to change how they view their relationship with the press in some cases. All commanders need to be open and honest with the press.
After a month of unanswered phone calls and emails, we discovered that Eifert had done nothing about the request except for send an email to a Pentagon public affairs officer. The Pentagon officer was on paternity leave, and Eifert refused to return numerous calls and emails while we waited for a response. She didn't seem to be acting on George Little's recent call for public affairs officers to develop stronger bonds with reporters. One reason for the Department of Defense's arrogant attitude towards the press is because the media puts up with it. Polling shows that America loves its military, and politicians and the media have allowed for the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned about to get completely out of control. Because politicians are deathly afraid of getting on the wrong side of the Department of Defense, even the two major oversight committees, the House and Senate Armed Services Committee, would not speak out publicly on the Pentagon's external relations and recruiting programs. With the exception of a few members of Congress, talk of Department of Defense media budgets are avoided at all costs. The Department of Defense's Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs works from within the Pentagon. Current Assistant Secretary Douglas Wilson is the principal advisor to the Secretary of Defense on Public Affairs and Information. Wilson was appointed to his position in December 2009 by President Obama. Although he was appointed to this position and considered to be the best candidate, his past experience speaks otherwise. In the past, his focus was set on international policy and public diplomacy. Each military branch has its own public affairs advisor, usually a general or admiral. While many possess great leadership skills and have worked hard to climb the ranks, most have little to no education or experience in public affairs. Army Chief of Public Affairs Brigadier General Gary Valesky, an infantry officer, previously served as Deputy Commanding General of the 1st Cavalry Division at Fort Hood. Director of Public Affairs for Marines, Brigadier General Paul Kennedy, holds a degree in advanced warfighting, but has no known training or experience in public affairs. It seems as though the flag officers that many rely on for information have little to no experience in public affairs. If these generals and admirals aren't trained, then who is? The contractor workforce has been steadily taking over the military. During the Gulf War, the contractor-to-uniformed military personnel ratio was 1:50. During the war in Iraq, the ratio was 1 contractor to every 6 military member. Information that was once classified and only to be seen by military officials is now in the hands of civilian contractors. The information the Pentagon chooses to share with the American public and the world is filtered through private contractors. Often the same companies that build the National Security Agency spy networks are feeding our troops. They supply the plumbers, planes, missiles, and munitions for our wars. They also completely control the messages of the armed forces and intelligence communities. Contractors like Booz Allen and a range of smaller politically connected, sometimes foreign-controlled firms are making huge profits by cutting reporters and journalists out of the process of the Pentagon's communications with the American public.
Most of these things you go out on nowadays, they have agreements you got to sign.
Agreements? Like contracts?
You got to sign a contract. If you go down to Guantanamo Bay, you got to sign a contract that they're going to review your photographs. They're going to edit your photographs for security purposes. But then again, they shouldn't be showing you things that are classified to begin with. When you go up to Dover Air Force Base.
This is where the bodies of the soldiers are, right.
You have to sign an agreement. What you can shoot, how you can shoot it, and all the other rules that they have up there. Otherwise, you can't come on the base to shoot the pictures. So it's not really, there are guidelines you have to adhere to. There are contracts you're signing that you have to adhere to when you cover an event. It's not a free press.
As Chief of Information for the United States Navy, Rear Admiral John Kirby has a background in surface warfare, but relies on outside contractors for public affairs.
They're basically getting paid by the government to do internal marketing. In other words, the contractor that may be building the ship is also doing the public affairs down the road to another contractor in some form, so that they're also selling the system to you through marketing, which the government's paying both sides for, the building and for the marketing.
The U.S. Navy Office of Information, or CHINFOS, recently awarded Booz Allen with a contract for communications planning and implementation, public relations, media relations, leadership messaging, social media, and a number of other communication and public affairs tools. The contract states that Booz Allen is ready to partner with Chinfos to meet the complex challenges of the ever-expanding global communication environment and to manage the Navy brand to ensure that Navy communicated one message with all voices. The one message will be spread with help of 10 communications and production companies hired by Booz Allen. A look under the public outreach tent at the Pentagon reveals a bloated and ineffective force that can't get the simple media communication accomplished without spending billions of taxpayer dollars. Military rigidity and command structure combined with an appalling lack of communication between military and civilian outreach elements contribute to an antiquated system mirrored in a culture where making a mistake can end a military career. When it comes to Pentagon outreach, members of Congress and their staff do not like to speak for the record, fearing Pentagon and contractor retribution on their home turf. A few will talk about big money wasted on poorly targeted military recruitment efforts.
Thanks, Reaper 1-1. We got it from here. Cinch is coming off target.
Way of life.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
For their country, for their fellow man, for themselves. It is the most powerful force on earth. America's Navy.
Congressman Jack Kingston and Congresswoman Betty McCollum questioned the military's advertising budget in May of 2012. The Kingston-McCollum amendment failed to put a ban on military sponsorships of professional sports. The amendment would have cut $72.3 million in spending to sponsor NASCAR, professional bass fishing, and Ultimate Fighting Championship teams and events. In the amendment, Kingston brought up the program ineffectiveness. The Department of Defense hoped that sponsoring such events would bring in a larger group of troops.
Well, what it did is keeps the military from spending money with NASCAR on recruitment. And the reason is because the military is drawing down right now 80,000 soldiers from the Army alone. And so does it make sense to have such an enormous budget for recruitment when you're pulling in your ranks? And that's part one. And part two is, what do you actually get for this when you advertise? We talked to the manufacturers of Miller Beer, and they said if we can't show that we've sold one more case of beer, then we can't do the advertising. And in our dealing, particularly with the National Guard, we could not get accurate metrics because this is not about brand, this is about recruitment, because that's what the budget specifically says, that's what the law is about. And so we've been concerned about how the money's been spent in the backdrop of sequestration and everything else.
And so I would just urge my colleagues to vote against this irresponsible amendment that is certainly politically charged, but at the end of the day will not save the taxpayers one single dime.
The amendment also stated that the National Guard claims a sponsored NASCAR event could bring in 24,800 inquiries. Of that, only 20 potential candidates. However, not a single recruit joined after the National Guard spent $26.5 million in sponsorships. NASCAR racing has an age distribution where the majority of viewership lies in the 35-plus age range. However, the maximum age to enlist is 35. It's difficult to justify $72 million in sponsorship spending when only 30% of viewers are eligible recruits. The same goes for bass fishing. The predominant age group is 35 to 44, out of the age to enlist.
The average demographic for NASCAR is 70% of the people who go to NASCAR are 35 years or older. That's not exactly what you're looking for in recruits.
Although studies have shown that sponsorships have brought in little to no recruits, the military continue to look for ways to intrigue the young soldier in you.
Sir, you may want to come take a look at this.
I'm going to the war. You just make sure and come back for the both of us, all right?
What are your orders? We're not going down without a fight.
I feel the need for speed.
For any military film to be approved by the government and utilize their equipment, they must send their script to Philip Strube. Philip Strube is the Director of Entertainment Media at the Department of Defense. The Pentagon doesn't always lend out their toys to everyone. They have their restrictions. No one wants to see a movie that makes the military look bad. Lending out troops and toys can get expensive and can be dangerous, as Mr. Stroop discussed in the documentary Operation Hollywood.
First of all, when we look at scripts, are we conducting damage control? And the answer is absolutely. It's not my role here to vilify the armed forces, because I'm a believer of the armed forces. I wouldn't be in this job if I didn't. And my colleagues feel the same way. Those who are in the military obviously are adherents, otherwise they would vote with their feet and quit. So we are all very much of the opinion that the military is an institution for the betterment of the United States. So any picture that's contrary to that fundamental premise is going to be a problem for us.
Ironically, the Pentagon helped with the production of box office bombs, but withheld support from Academy Award-winning films.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Private Powell, what are you trying to do to my beloved Corps? Sir, I don't know, sir. You are dumb, Private Powell, but do you expect me to believe that you don't know left from right? Sir, no, sir. Then you did that on purpose. You want to be different. Sir, no, sir. What side was that, Private Pyle? Sir, left side, sir. Are you sure, Private Pyle? Sir, yes, sir.
What's he doing?
I don't know. What are you doing? There's enough bag in there to send us all to Jesus. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die comfortable.
Movers are inbound at this time, over. Then it felt like something just jumped up and bit me.
Like any other war, Department of Defense public information specialists battle for our hearts and minds with propaganda, intelligence, and deception. It is all directed by flag-ranked officers and a huge contractor force. Many of these officers end up working for the same contractors they hired, receiving their salary and pension at taxpayers' expense. Taxpayers are not only paying for propaganda directed at themselves, but also for a huge profit for the contractors approved by the same high-ranking officials who often end up on their payroll.
We contacted the Department of Defense to get details on their outreach and their final budget.
We were treated to a long series of emails and phone calls promising openness, but leading to nothing.
What it is.
Well, it's public relations, public affairs. It's basically they're putting out their message the way they want to see it put out to the public. In a way, it's propaganda.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.